Years ago, I moved into a gated community, an area parcel carriers classify as extended, their operative phrase exempting them from overnight promises. I reasoned it would be a quiet place to write, and, at first, it was. I got up early, I wrote, I produced. But then distantly, the theme to Green Acres would begin, and with it came Delbert, the neighbor. He would only drop in if my writing was going well. This wasn't a possibility, it was a fact. If I didn't have the coffee pot on, Delbert would put it on. From there my day plummeted, as Delbert often had plans for me, like helping him work his cattle, or get his tractor started, or go poach wood from the Forest Service. Wood was not the only thing Delbert poached. DNA would trace him straight to Robin Hood. Delbert wasn't born in this stone house, but started off the third day of his life here. Eventually he inherited the ranch, living out his life on it. He was never wired to the grid. He used a generator and kerosene lamps. The only stock he owned or cared about were his cattle. Wall Street might as well have been on Mars. His parents had, during the Depression, migrated from Yakima, moved into this stone house, and for a pittance began buying the surrounding dry land acreage. Fence lines were understood agreements that deviated around rock piles or other obstacles, but where the fence line adjoined government land, it generously encroached no small amount of acreage. His ranch kept him busy, but not busy enough to not bother me. He napped, he drank too much at times, worked hard, and read westerns by the dozen. And like in his westerns, he enjoyed a good fight. I was certain he would die with his boots on. Unlike his westerns, if he was in a truck and a fight seemed imminent, he'd put his teeth on the dashboard. I'd little in common with Delbert. His pickup alone testified this. It was bashed and dirty but functional. An anthropologist could have written a thesis on his truck's contents. His truck's abuses were not normal, like the caved-in door where he had tried herding his bull at high speed, only the bull challenged him. The top of the bed indented from a misfallen tree. Or the grill and hood caved in by the closed gate he crashed through outrunning the sheriff. I said, "Delbert, wouldn't it have been easier and cheaper just to pull over?" "No," he said. "I wasn't doing anything wrong. He's got no right to harass me." If any law enforcement agency harassed Delbert, it was Fish and Game, but usually with good reason. Reasons that started in high school when he shot a buck and hung it untagged in his least popular teacher's garage, then anonymously called Fish and Game. From the start he loved to fish and hunt. Here he is in his youth looking like Beaver Cleaver. And here in younger years. I always wondered at what age he lost his innocence, becoming the Delbert I came to know. How much of Delbert was inherited and how much was forged by the environment. I tried imagining wintering over in this stone house, who I'd be if I'd grown up here. His parents were notoriously tough and had an equal reputation for drinking and fighting. Once coming up the grade in the family pickup, Delbert, 4, and his brother, 5, were in the back when the parents got into an argument that erupted onto the road into a fist fight. Meanwhile, the truck popped out of gear and careened down the road, the boys still in the back. I imagine the look on their faces. The truck hit a guardrail, stopping it from rolling down the bank. Naturally, when it came to raising his own kids, Delbert wasn't the most sensitive parent on the range. When I moved onto the hill, Delbert was 35 and divorcing his second wife. He had a boy and a girl. He obtained joint custody of the kids, but circumstances were, as always, against him. Trying to babysit, he got an old TV, climbed the nearest pine, put up an antenna, laid the wire across his field to his house, drilled a hole through the wall, and ran it inside across the living room and onto a coffee table. He turned on his generator and TV. There was more fuzz than picture, but his kids were delighted and sat mesmerized as he snuck out to do his chores. When he returned, they were screaming, hysterically. A cow had tangled in the cable out in the field, and the TV, as if possessed, had flown off the table, skidded across the floor, and snugged up against the wall. Over the years, I came to see Delbert differently. I'd begun taking his ways for granted when a rancher commented, "You know, Delbert, if he didn't like you, you wouldn't like living where you do." I hadn't thought about it, but putting it this way, I felt privileged. Whether right or wrong, he stood up for what he felt, like when moving his cattle down the road and a log truck came barreling through the herd. Delbert, seething, putting his teeth on the dash, waited for the truck to return. Only waited in front of my house. Delbert confronted the driver and tried yanking him out of the cab to get a good swing at him. The driver, though, fought him off, drove around the corner, and thinking my place was Delbert's, proceeded to set my land on fire. I fought fire all afternoon. Delbert simply scratched a line between the road and the creek and said, "Don't worry, you could use a good fire, and this one's not going anywhere." Then he went home and slept on his couch. In the spring, the burned area greened up brighter than any other on my property. As time passed, Delbert entangled himself into my life even more. I bought a wildland fire truck, and I contracted out to the Forest Service. When I was called up, my paperwork wasn't in order, nor did I have a crew. Delbert said, "Heck with it. I'll be your crew." He was not at all certified. "All they can do," he said, "is kick us off." After 6 days on that first fire, we were to be demobilized. The fire was mostly contained, but there was suspicions I wasn't legit. Out of 5 trucks, I would be the first cut. One truck crew had sucked up to the division boss all week and would be the last to be let go, and I told Delbert so. "That's what they think," he said. Then he sacked out. As predicted, in the morning, my engine was crossed off the roster. I woke Delbert and told him we'd been let go. "Don't be so sure," he said, and went back to sleep. Half an hour later, the division boss informed me I was back on. One of the other engines wouldn't start. I told Delbert. He just grinned. I said, "How did you know?" He pulled the truck's coil wire from his pocket. One December eve, the phone rang. My wife, Carol, took the call. "Delbert's just had a heart attack," she said. Delbert was lying on the kitchen floor. Carol pumped his chest. I did mouth to mouth. I thought, "At least you could have shaved, Delbert. That and put your teeth in." It was hard to get a good seal. There was no response. We knew we were only going through the motions. After 45 minutes, the ambulance arrived, but by then it was too late. I didn't want him to live. I didn't want to see him a vegetable. Finally, the ambulance crew, declaring him dead, pulled the blanket over his face. His feet stuck out. As they carried him out the door, I muttered, "At least you died with your boots on, Delbert." I watched through a blur of tears as they slid him into the ambulance and shut the door. The ambulance lurched into gear. I returned into the house and looked out the window. The ambulance was stuck in the driveway. Its lights were flashing, but reflecting in the icicles, they looked just like Christmas lights.